Welcome to Running for Real, a global community with a shared love and curiosity for running. Together we reconnect with the reasons why we love to run and discover ways it helps us become better people. Whether it's the quiet moments of a morning run while the rest of the world still sleeps, or befriending the strangers next to you at the start line of a race, we are here to connect with others who see running as the common thread that weaves our lives together. Come join me, Tina Muir, as I talk with people from all walks of life, united by a love of running. Hello, my friends. Welcome to episode 362 of the Running for Real podcast. Thank you for joining me today. I'm excited that you are here and excited to dive right into this conversation with Lindsey Freeman, who has written this book, Running. It is a handbook. It is small. It is easy read. It is made for runners. And as Lindsey is an associate professor of sociology at Simon Fraser University, she is used to writing. She is used to telling things eloquently and concisely. And I really loved reading this book. So I want you to join me in this conversation. We're going to talk about some really different things to what you might hear me talk about with other guests who have had running books. This book I read in 2 days. I loved it, and I encourage you to go check it out. So let's go meet Lindsey. Thank you to Tracksmith for sponsoring this episode of the Running for Real podcast and for supporting everything that we are doing at Running for Real in terms of the work that we try to put out into the world. We try to give back, and I love that Tracksmith continues to support. And the other week, last week, I got to go to a Twilight Tracksmith meet, and it was so much fun. I paced two runners in the slower heat. One of the runners ran 11:45 minute pace, and the other runner was running about 7:45 pace. And I absolutely had a blast. It was such a supportive and welcoming and inclusive community. I really loved the energy around the room, and I encourage you to go check out those Tracksmith Twilight meets if you have one coming up in your city. There is an events tab on the Tracksmith website where you can go check out what is coming up. You can also see long runs on there if there are long runs in your cities. Finally, I want to mention just a few of my favorite items currently that I'm loving. I don't actually tend to get many of the newer items because, as I've mentioned many times, Tracksmith quality is so high that the items I've been using since 2019 are still performing exactly the same as well as they ever did back then. So I'm still using my same speed session shorts that I've been using for 4 years now. Also the same with the sports bras that they've sent me and the tank tops. I live in the various tank tops. I love the Session tank, the Horizon tank, the Twilight tank. I have all these tanks that I live in. The Van Cortlandt tank is a fun one. I definitely encourage you to go check out some of their tanks, some of their items that can be used in many of the different seasons. I love each of these for life, but also for running. And if you use code TINANEW, if you are a new customer, you can go to tracksmith.com/Tina. If you use code TINANEW, you can get yourself $15 off your order of $75 or more. If you are a current customer, you will give a donation and also get free shipping by using code TINAGIVE. And I want to encourage you to go check it out because one of the things you'll hear Zoe and I talk about often is that buying quality items is one of the best things you can do environmentally. So getting these quality Tracksmith items will set you up for many years to come, mean that you don't have to keep buying new items. So if you are ready to get something new, head on over to tracksmith.com/Tina. Friends, we are just a few days away from Becoming a Sustainable Runner being out in the world. It is officially available. If you ordered on Amazon, it will be there to you within 10 days if you are listening to this episode on the day it comes out. If you have ordered it from some other retailers, you may even get it a little bit early. Stop waiting to pre-order. I know we all think, oh, I'm just going to wait until it comes out. Now is the time. I really appreciate those of you who have pre-orders, who have supported Zoe and I just want to thank you. I want to remind you, go get Becoming a Sustainable Runner at becomingaSustainableRunner.com. You'll find it with all your favorite retailers. Thank you so much for listening today, and thank you so much for your support with our book. Lindsey, I am excited to welcome you to the Running for Real podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks so much, Tina.
Yeah, no, I'm excited to dive in today to our conversation. And I want to begin by mentioning that I did recently read your book, Running. Do you call it just running, or do you call it Practices Running? What do you tend to refer to it as?
I just call it running.
Okay, yep. Okay, so if someone typed in
Practices running is good too.
Okay, but would it come up like in Amazon or somewhere if they just typed running in, or would they need to type your name if someone was going to find it?
I think you would probably need to type my name.
Yeah, just because it's such a that's a word that we're all very well accustomed to, is the word running. But anyway, running. I read your little handbook. It is a small book which I loved. As you know, I took it with me on my vacation. I read it while I was sitting on the beach. It is definitely a little bit beaten up now, but gives it a bit of personality to it. And I want to begin by talking about like why you decided to write this. Like you, on the back, it is described as a feminist and queer handbook of running. And I want to understand first, like why choose those words to describe it, and why even the word handbook too, because that's not typically something that is used to describe a running book, but it really does sum it up well once you explain why that is.
Yeah, well, I was actually invited to write a book for this series called Practices, which is a new book series from Duke University Press. And the only rule was that you couldn't write about writing and you couldn't write about teaching. And I don't have like a whole lot of hobbies. So running is something I've done my whole life. And I've always wanted to write about it. And I have like kept a notebook, but I hadn't kind of formalized it in a way. So I thought this was the perfect opportunity to do that. And I chose queer and feminist because when I started thinking about writing about running, I thought about these handbooks and these running books that my parents had as a child around the house, like James Fix's, Complete Book of Running and these sorts of books. And I revisited some of those and kind of looked at that genre, and I became really interested in thinking with that genre and how to twist it a little bit. And the other thing I noticed was just like how heteronormative those books were, and how I didn't even, in some of the newer books about running, see a lot of queerness. It was kind of assumed heterosexual spaces, assumed kind of more normative spaces for the most part. So I just wanted to kind of write from, especially about running, because it's so much about your body, write from myself and through myself and my communities. So that's kind of the angle I took. Yeah.
Yeah, and I want to go into some of that a bit later, but I want to start by talking about a few of the things that were kind of themes throughout the book that I think all of my listeners will be interested in, because it's something that I really speak about often. But as you mentioned, it isn't something that is talked about as much in running culture. And you talked yourself about feeling distant from popular representation. And I think that is very much a common thing that many runners experience, because I've admitted this several times myself. I think I represent what running is, come from an elite background. I'm a straight white cis woman. Have a body that looks like what most media represents as running. And I love that things are changing. And I want to ask you about how much and if you think it's actually changing. But I want to begin by going into some of that. And I want to start by reading, if you're comfortable with this, reading a quote from the book that I really loved and I think will speak to many people listening. So are you comfortable with me reading it? Okay.
Go ahead. Yeah.
It always sounds a bit weird for people hearing their own stuff. While setting records certainly ferries pleasure, what I love most about running is the way it allows me to make time and space for being in a body. Can I read? Apparently not. To make time and space for being in a body, feeling my way through a landscape and my own thoughts. Tell us about that, because again, that goes back to what I was saying a second ago, that a lot of what we see in running books, in media, is about this. You gotta run your hardest, you got to do your best, you always got to be striving for more. And while Zoe and I hammer this point, especially in becoming a sustainable runner, like it really isn't a message that is passed around too much, but is starting to. So tell us about what that means to you.
For me, I think that especially like as I age and think about just a longevity of running, I think it just connects me to my most like animal best parts. And I think that, I still want to be faster. I still want to do well in races, but really I just want to be free, And I think I look to running for a kind of freedom in the day or a free moment where I just get to connect with myself and the land I'm running with or who I'm running with if I'm running with other people. I think that like I was conditioned a bit about this in my upbringing because my parents, as I said, they weren't good runners, but they were enthusiastic runners. And one of the things that you could always do to have your own time is go for a run or do your homework. So I think that I've continued to rely on that my whole life, that just you need a break, you need a reset to connect with yourself. Running is there for you. So I think that's the way that I think of it. And I think of like most of our experiences with running is very different experientially than it appears on Instagram or Strava or wherever in the social network realm.
Yeah, you talked a lot throughout the book of the theme. It was quite a regular theme that I saw about running being a practice. And I really loved the way that you explained that, about how so often we get into the weeds of looking at an individual run, and we look at, what did that run mean? What did that run say? What are the numbers around this mean? But you talked about the importance of it just being this regular thing, this thing that you continue to do. And you talked about it being just something that allows you to just get in this rhythm and this routine of doing something over and over, day after day. So could you tell us a little bit about that, just taking that point a little bit further?
I think, sometimes if you want to think about it in a kind of progress narrative or something, people will talk about being consistent and like those like being consistent adds up to little gains or something like that. But I prefer to just think about it as like, every day you're remaking your life. I think we forget because we get caught in just the patterns of living without thinking about it. But every day we make a choice to, like if I don't get up to make sentences, like I won't make another book. It's just every day. And it doesn't mean that I make good sentences every time, because I certainly don't. But it's the same with running. I think we continue to remake ourselves each day through the repetitive things we do. And, most people aren't elite athletes, and it doesn't mean that that's not nothing, that how you're making yourself through the things you do. And I think just loving something, whether it's running or painting or, making a garden, I think is really beautiful. I think just that adherence to your practice is something that's really moving to me. And something that's very beautiful about humans.
I love that, and so true. And I'm glad you mentioned that it can be other things. I quite often spend time telling people that, I get a lot of teenagers come up to me who clearly their passion for the sport is gone, or they're finding something, they're drawn to something else, and they're having such a hard time trying to decide what to do because this is all they've known. And I love encouraging them to find, if it is, like you said, painting, or it is like going for hikes instead of running, but slowing all the way down to like be able to stop whenever you want. And I think you're right that it's just following that heart. It's the commitment of it. It's the consistency of it. And that may change over time too. And I appreciate you sharing that. And I just love the way that you explained it through the book. It was something that really spoke to me. And I think at this point, maybe it would make sense to go back to your running journey. You mentioned your parents were both, very enthusiastic runners. You describe yourself as an okay runner, which I think most of my listeners are still going to be like, you're better than okay. But do you want to tell us a bit about, some of the parts of your early running memories, your early running journey that have led to this moment?
Sure. Sometimes when I go around with the book, people are like, when did you start running? And I can't ever remember because I was really young, and I would run these, tiny races in my East Tennessee town with my parents when I was very small. And then
Wait, how small are we
ran,
talking?
Oh, like maybe 5, 6.
Okay, so my kids, they did a little Tracksmith, a little 500-meter run last weekend. So when they're older, is that what they're going to say? Because technically they did a little race.
Yeah, they're going to say that.
Okay, all right. Sorry, keep going. I just got distracted for a second.
Do you want that? Is that a goal?
If they want to, that would be my thing. I don't want to do anything. I don't want them to feel because of me or because my husband's a runner as well that they have to run. So as long as they want to, and I will admit, actually, just if you don't mind for a second while we're on this, I noticed the other day when I was running with my 3-year-old, it was just a 500, no time, no nothing, no medal, no nothing. It was just the Tracksmith had this twilight meet. They both wanted to do it because be like mummy. I did notice though when my 3-year-old Chloe was 200 to go, she said, "Mummy, how much further?" And I was like, "We just got to go there. Come on, Chloe, come on." And then I started hearing myself say, "Come on, come on." And then I was like, "Oh, stop it. Don't do that." So I had to pull back because I realized I was starting to already get sucked into being like, "Come on, keep going." When obviously I don't want to push that into. So in answer to your question, if they want to, but it will, that obviously it's a very similar situation that two parents that are enthusiastic, they will probably say the same thing, but I'll be interested to see if both of them are runners or any of them are runners. One of them is definitely, she leans towards the art side of things. So she may combine them or have only want to be in the art creative space. Anyway, back to your story. So you you started running young before you can remember. And what were you going to say from that?
Oh, and then I ran in middle school. There's a story about that in the book. And then I just always ran, but never competed for a long time because I was playing soccer was my main thing. And I also played tennis and some other things, but I was really a soccer player as identified. And then I went to college on a soccer scholarship, and I was just running around one day, and I had friends on the track team, and they said, Lindsey, come run with us. And I was like, stop, teasing me or whatever. And they're like, no, come. And so I did. And I don't know why I was allowed to do this, but I just practiced with the team. And they're like, come back tomorrow. And I was like, okay. Because I had to train, for soccer too. So I came back, and I came back every day that week. And then afterwards, the coach was like, hey, can we talk in my office? And that's how I also became a college track athlete through that. So, and then, I took some time, and I had a lot of injuries in college, but I always ran. And now I guess just zoom fast forward many, many years later till today, I'm still running. And right now I'm training for the California International Marathon.
I will be there,
fall,
so I will see you there. That's cool.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Yes, then I'll be able to go cheer you on. Okay, so then related to that, you kind of, as I said earlier, you describe yourself as an okay runner. Do you feel the attitude has changed towards that thinking, being able to, maybe you were always comfortable saying it, but do you feel that the conversations have changed around not necessarily feeling like, unless you're an elite athlete, you might as well just say, I'm slow. I very much feel like there has been some positive movement in terms of conversations that are happening around it's okay if you want to run slow and just enjoy yourself and just take a step back. It's okay if you want to just run an hour every day and call it good, like whatever it may be. So I'd love to hear your perspective on that, having grown up with this sport and also having this beautiful, appreciation that you have for the sport and the way you're able to see it.
I think it's changing, but I don't really know. I mean, I position myself as an okay runner because I think that that's really honest. Like, I especially because you're writing a book about running, right? And I'm not winning anything, and I haven't, since I was in middle school. So occasionally in a small race, I'll come in age group second. But so I think it is just a way. I think it's honest. I think some people that I'm faster than will be like, oh, you're being modest. And I'm like, no, because then it's like, I talk to you or I talk to somebody else. And it really is like, I think it's accurate. Yeah. And I think there is a movement to thinking about being okay with slowing things down. I mean, I think as a sociologist, I think some of us are trying to resist capitalist production grind culture. Mm-hmm. So I think it's even penetrating running world, which is something to be like, I don't always have to, be the fastest, do the most. I can focus on a kind of enjoyment or appreciation of like, running with other people at their pace. I think all of this there's a lot of ways to kind of slow it down.
Yeah.
And it being everything, running including.
Thank you to 2Before for sponsoring this episode of the Running For Real podcast. I have been using 2Before for months now, and I absolutely love it. I love the taste. Blackcurrant, which is a berry for Americans, is one of my favorite flavors. This flavor, by the way, comes from New Zealand. You can also get it in the UK, and it is a natural performance nutrition food. So it's going to increase your endurance. It's going to help you manage inflammation. It's going to support your immunity and promote adaptation, all things that we need. The antioxidants in those blackcurrants are super high that is going to make it a natural pre-workout. And by the way, a blackcurrant, if you haven't had it before, it's like a little bit sweet, a little bit tangy. It's a berry, and it is delicious. Now they have caffeinated version and caffeine-free versions, depending on what you need. I like having the caffeine versions before my hard workouts and my long runs in the mornings. And when I'm doing afternoon runs, I definitely take those caffeine-free versions to give me that little extra pep in my step for the 2-a-days or for the afternoon runs where I'm feeling really tired. And those antioxidants are called anthocyanins, and that is science-backed and benefit-packed. That you can go check out more on 2Before. That's the number 2, 2before.com. If you use code TINA, you can get yourself 30% off. It is ideal to drink daily before your hard workouts and your long runs. If you are someone who is really wanting to strive for something big, if you are someone who is really trying to get more out of your life because you have so much going on, go check this out. The number 2before.com. Use code TINA for 30% off. And with that, you talk about the, we've said that it's a practice. We've said that it can be various paces. But another thing that running is often associated with is a lonely sport, an individual sport, a solitary sport. And you talked about it can also be a space for connection, a place to view to create these special friendships. So I'd love to hear your perspective on that. And obviously you go into this in the book, but I think this is something that people will really find an interest in.
Yeah, I think that also there is a fantasy, especially in running narratives, maybe not even books as much as movies or something. You see this like beautiful shot, right, of this person running up a mountain by themselves, or there's the montage, they slowly get better.
Yep.
But I think in real life, like a lot of us who are in the sport actually do find lots and lots of connection. And, there's so like running clubs are booming, right? At every level. And especially I think post-pandemic, people just needed to be with people. And there's something kind of radical about breathing with people post-pandemic. Outside as safe as you can, still, this shouldn't say post-pandemic, it's still going, but at this stage.
Yep.
And I think that there is just something different that you learn about people when you run with them, because it is, you're often not wearing much clothing. You're kind of pushing yourselves. You're out there. It's very vulnerable. In a way that you don't get to be vulnerable with a lot of people unless you're intimates.
Yes, absolutely experienced that. And you do tend to, I've had someone, I can't remember who it was, a long time ago, referred to it as like telling secrets to the wind, because you're running, you're not looking at each other, you're running side by side, you're, you as you said, you're doing this intimate thing, you're doing this vulnerable thing together. And it just becomes so much easier to break down those barriers that can be uncomfortable and can prevent us from sharing things about ourselves. That's really been my experience as well. And many of my closest friendships now are runners, because they, it really does allow you to get to know people on a deeper level, and just is really important in that. Is there anything else you want to add on that point?
Oh, I would just say that exactly what you said, and that it can sometimes be like an accelerated friendship, it's like going on a road trip with somebody. I think it is. Yeah. Like secrets to the wind is a good way to put that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that said, I'd like to, you talked about, how you kind of don't quite feel comfortable with a lot of the messaging that has come out in the last 20 or so years about that humans are born to do this. We've always done this. This is evolutionary. And explain your thinking with that. Like, go into as much depth as you feel comfortable in terms of what is it about that mindset that doesn't really sit right with you.
Yeah, I think that especially in like very popular running books, there's been a lot, and maybe it's a marketing push because I think it's a simple message that, the idea that we were born to do this. I think if you look at the variety of people's bodies, not everyone can run without, prosthetics or other kinds of accoutrements. And I think the insistence on that it's the body itself doesn't sit right with me. I think that it's also this way to, I think it's also in line with this kind of ideal of like capitalist body production, honestly, that like, if you're not running, it's something that is your fault, like you're lazy or you've fallen into this, modern lifestyle that's made you sedentary, when really we were born to run. And I think that humans have the capacity to do so many different things with their bodies, with their minds, with their creativity. And I love running, but I don't think it's a mandate that everyone needs to run or that everyone is born to run. I personally think that that people really weren't born to do anything. And that's why I think that running or any other practice is really beautiful, because we choose to do it. We choose to put time into it. The other problem with some of these narratives of being born to run is I think that they fetishize and fantasize Indigenous peoples often, and also put them in a kind of different time, before untouched time, where people were more in tune to their bodies and their land. And some of that may be true, but I think we also need to remember that Indigenous people are still here running with us. So I think that there's this, we've discovered this hidden tribe or this hidden group of people, and they're not hidden. They're there. They've been there all along doing what they do.
Yeah, no, absolutely agree. And yeah, we've had this conversation with many of the Indigenous runners, Indigenous, people who've come on the podcast talked about this because of that, that exact concept. And within that, you said during that conversation there that because we do it because I can't remember exactly the way you said it, but you said in the book about we do it because we like it. Explain your thinking there, because while I agree with you and I can hear that, I also, someone listening might think, well, I don't know if I do like it. I feel like it's and maybe that ties back to what we were saying about practices. Not every day is going to be like going out there and feeling good. Like this morning on my run, I was struggling from step one. I had a friend to run with, but even so, I was not enjoying myself because I just felt so wiped from the heat and humidity. So what about for someone listening who might read that or think, because we like it, and think, do I though? So how does that tie into the practice piece for you?
That's hilarious, and I know exactly what you mean. I think you don't like it on the day always, but in general, you like it.
Yes.
And you're smiling. You like it now. You like that you did.
Oh yeah, yeah. And right. That's where, like for me, as you said, it is that practice. It's that understanding that there are going to be days like today where it's just get through it. I went into Panera, filled up my handheld water bottle, had lots of people giving me dirty looks of like, you gross, sweaty thing, get out of here. But I was like, I'm getting cold water, I don't care. And then there's other days where the heat and humidity are the same, but you might just not have as much going on that day, or you might just, your expectations are different or whatever it might be, and you feel better. So, for me, it's like understanding that there's going to be days I feel great, there's going to be days I feel terrible, and there's going to be many, many days in between. What about you?
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. Like yesterday, I had my long run, and I have like chronic Achilles tendonitis, and it was just like hitting me, and I was so frustrated because otherwise I felt good. I felt like I could go forever, but my tendon was just like screaming. And I'm running in Wellington. I'm in New Zealand right now. And some guy, I mean, this would never happen in Vancouver, was a very reserved place, came by and was like, hey, good effort, and wanted to give me a high five. It was like, how much are you doing today? And it really did. It's funny because I don't know that I would always like that, but it was the right thing for me yesterday. And it did just give me a little joy, and I relaxed my tendon a little bit, and I felt that I could finish my run, which was really funny. But I think also like to like something is interesting, right? Because I think we like it. I like it because it's hard. Mm-hmm. And I like it because I sometimes don't like it.
Yes, definitely understand that piece. I want to move on to another piece that really stuck out to me, another conversation that you had. And I want to first mention that, within the book, you'd broken it down into tiny little chapters. How many chapters were there? 30 or something?
Oh, I don't know.
Chapters.
Very small.
Yeah, very, very small chapters, all like summed up as something that we do as runners or need to know as runners. So like speed play, personal best, training for the Boston Marathon, repetitive stress, runner's high, loops, practice, repetition, ritual. So cool down and stretching. I really love the way that you broke it down. But one thing that really spoke to me that I felt I needed to hear, and I genuinely believe that a lot of the time we as runners need messages come into our lives of what we really are, is we're conscious of, that is very much on our mind, that is something we need to hear. And for me, it was you talking about, I think you mentioned Joan Didion. Is that how you say her last name?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And she said about you want to remain on nodding terms with the person you used to be, and maintaining that relationship with the people we used to be. I would love if you would explain your thinking around that, as that really spoke to me, because I think sometimes I look back on my past self with so much judgment and like, oh, you idiot, why didn't you see that better? But I would love to hear your thoughts around that.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I also am someone who looks back with a lot of judgment and really hard on myself. When I wrote this book, before I should just say briefly that I often wrote about atomic and nuclear culture before I wrote about running. And so when I got the chance to write about running, my first thought was, oh, I love running. This is going to be so fun. And like just about, this practice that I really enjoy. But when I got into it, it was about everything. It was about my whole life and my disappointments with my body and my joy. And so one of the things that came back was writing about running when I was at university at college, and a difficult time I had there as a closeted athlete and being injured. I had a really unhappy time at college when I wasn't able to do my sports. And I have always been so hard on myself of why didn't I leave? Why was I in this terrible situation? I was very unhappy. Why didn't I leave and go someplace else? And I've been judging myself for 20 plus years about this. And when I wrote through it, I could see who I was then. And why I wasn't able to leave. Like I was really depressed, and I just like, I didn't have it to get it together to make a change. And I think just through writing, through recognizing myself there, I could see not like what I would do from this position, but why I wasn't able to act in that position. And it really made me think. I've used that Joan Didion quote like a lot of times, like in my personal life, and especially to give other people advice, that this time it really came back and resonated with me. And I think honestly, for the first time, was able to kind of forgive myself about that time period through writing the book.
Yeah. And if you've used that a lot, have you found other people I said it, but beyond me, have other people resonated with that as well?
Yeah, I think Joan Didion's a really good writer, and I think that hits with people, right? Because I think it's not this kind of trite idea of being true to yourself or something that we sometimes hear, right? It's being able to look at yourself and just recognize it, recognize what was happening, recognize that person that you were.
Friends, we are just a few days away from becoming a sustainable runner, coming out into the world. In fact, if you put your order in now, you may get it within the next few days. They are coming in early. I am hearing people saying that they are getting their copies already, and I encourage you to go order at becomingasustablerunner.com. When I say becoming a sustainable runner, Zoe and I broke this book down into 3 parts. The first part is about becoming sustainable humans, sustainable runners in terms of an individualistic perspective, because we understand that we need to take care of ourselves, our body. We need to change the relationship we have with our bodies and with our running, that there is so much more to running than just setting these big, massive goals, striving to reach them and missing so much. We give you opportunities to explore what running means to you, to be lifelong runners, which we know you will want. In the middle third, we are talking about community, ways to engage, ways to create groups, be a part of groups, find your community, give back to the community. Again, it's going to enhance your running, make it feel so much more enjoyable because it's so much more well-rounded and balanced. And of course, the final third is planetary sustainability. Yes, we are talking about some tough topics in here, but we also break it down to be very digestible, very relatable, and we also talk a lot about being imperfect with all of this book. The reason it's called Becoming a Sustainable Runner is because there is no destination. None of us are there. We're not going to be out there. We want to take the pressure off you so you don't feel like you're a horrible human for drinking out of a plastic bottle, but you actually are motivated to do something within every area of your life, but you don't feel like you're just nothing you can do is good enough. So go over to becomingasustablerunner.com. It's got links to all your favorite retailers where you can get it there. Supporting me, supporting Zoe is the biggest thing you can do. Thank you so much for your support if you've already pre-ordered, and I can't wait to hear what you think. So for someone who is listening to this and they are maybe not in that exact situation of like you said about leaving a college, but maybe they're in a situation where they know for the best of them they should do this. They probably will look back on this and be like, oh, why didn't you do it? But they just feel like they can't right now. What would you tell that person?
Wow, that's hard. I don't know. It's so hard to know what to do when you're in this thing, when you're in it. I would say therapy helps. I would say that's generally a good move.
Yes.
Just to kind of help you reframe the narrative of your life.
It's hard. Yeah. And I mentioned earlier, that for me, I really believe that you hear things and take things in when you're ready to take them in. Messages are placed in front of you, or you come to find, or you come across things that are there to speak to you at the right time. And I don't know what you do and don't know about my background with red S, amenorrhea, not having a period, and why that caused me to quit running professionally, but potentially forever when I did it. And people often ask me, what would you change if you can go back? And I always say, I wouldn't change anything, because even if I could go back and talk to myself, I wouldn't listen. I wasn't ready. I needed to go through those lessons that I needed to go through. But that doesn't mean that myself talking might not be the message that someone needed to hear at just that moment that does kick them to make a change. But there's no forcing that. It just either happened. It just kind of speaks to you in a way that makes you have enough motivation, inspiration, activation to make change, or you continue down that path until the message is right, or until the time is right for you to make that change. But it is difficult to know. I think we do put a lot of pressure on ourselves of like, why can't I change this thing? But if you're not ready to, and I'm reading a book right now, and they talk about how often people need to hit rock bottom within whatever it is that is bothering them before they take that action, because the rest of the time you can say that you want to get out of your job you hate, but unless there's something that forces you to move out of that change and to make that change, you're probably not going to make it. So,
yeah. But it's brutal to have to always hit rock bottom, isn't it? It's so brutal.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I wish that, the culture around supporting athletes, maybe still is different and was different when I was younger. I think there's a difficult thing about it being just focused on individual choices. Because I don't know how to see myself always. For example, I had a bad knee injury, like the year before, and I just couldn't heal from it. And I was thought that I was doing all of the things. I just couldn't heal from it. I couldn't figure out what was going on. And then I got this amazing sports medicine doctor, and, she tested my blood, and it turns out I was super deficient in a bunch of vitamins and iron. And I always think I eat well. I felt very confident, that I was doing all the right things, but then, confronted with this what's actually in my blood, I had to look at it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to take this nodding terms, thinking about your past self. Are there any other points you want to make about, you know, what Joan Didion said or what you did in your thinking about that with moving into new versions of yourself, or learning to forgive those parts of yourself? You said it took you many years, but let's do it the other direction. If someone listening to this is having trouble forgiving themselves for a past mistake, what would you say to that person?
I would just say to really try and be gentle with yourself if you can, because I don't know, life is very hard, and I think that we are often more generous, maybe especially women and women adjacent people, with other people than we are with ourselves. And I think that's one thing. We're very hard on ourselves. And another thing I think sometimes I have, and maybe other people have, is sort of a fantasy that is embarrassing if you look at it, that you can control everything. And right. And you can't. Like, the world is large. There's big forces. You're not always going to be your best self on every day. I think that, like, the world is a hard place, and I think if you can be gentle with yourself, like, think about, like, oh, would you treat your friend this way? Like, if your friend was, made a mistake or was caught in a bad loop, like, how would you talk to them? I think is a good way to approach things.
Yep. No, I agree. That's something I say as well. Because we definitely are a lot harder on ourselves than we are on other people. And again, Zoe and I spoke to this point in becoming a sustainable runner as well, about just the way that we talk to ourselves, the standards that we have for ourselves compared to what we give to other people. And, of course, we feel like we're constantly failing. And there's a lot of smart people who are in jobs that are intentionally making us feel like we're failing, because then they have, the ideal solution of buy this beauty product and you'll feel beautiful and it'll fix all your problems. And so, I hope that we can continue that conversation. And I really love that you brought that up. And as I said, for me, that was really something that I hadn't thought about, and is something I hadn't even started trying to work on, but now I want to from that. I mentioned at the beginning about, you defining this as a feminist and queer running handbook. Now, for someone listening to this who may have heard of the word queer, and they might be thinking like, okay, queer, that means LGBTQ plus. What does this mean to you when you describe this handbook as queer writing or a queer way of living? Can you explain that for someone who maybe hasn't come across that, or is having trouble understanding that?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. And first, I will say that it's a queer and feminist handbook about running, but I do feel that it is a book for all runners.
Yes.
And the only difference is it's written through my voice that I didn't kind of find out there. But yeah, queer is a huge umbrella term, right? That is expansive. It's about gender identity. It's about sexuality. But also through my writing and being an academic and thinking with social theory, this is also using the perspective of queer theory, which is a kind of branch of knowledge that decenters heteronormativity and tries to look at the world without these normative structures in place. So
when you say heteronormative, can I just ask you, like, for someone taking it back another step, what does heteronormative mean?
Oh, yeah, thank you. So heteronormative means taking for granted that the world is organized like around heterosexuality as just the norm. It's not questioned. It's just, you just move through that like it's glass or something. But so for people who fit that mold, then everything unfolds quite easily. But if you don't, then it's kind of harder to operate in the world. It's harder to be seen. It's harder to grasp the meaning of things. And so my book is just written from a different perspective, which I'm saying is a queer perspective, which is queer theory, which is just decentering that. And just taking a kind of I like to think about it as taking a sideways look at what has gone before. I should be good at doing this because this is my job, but I don't know if I fully explained it.
No, I mean, I think that's a good example, though, that even the things that we are, supposed to be best at, or the things that we do for a living, aren't always easy to do. I mean, I am not very concise at asking questions on podcasts, even though I've been doing this for many years. So I think that brings the realness, the humanness to that. And you did explain it, and the feminist piece of this. Would you say you also just explained that there, or do you see that as something different?
Oh, I guess the feminist piece is slightly different, but the feminist, being a feminist is just meaning that you think that people of all genders are equal and should have equal power and position and being able to be cultural makers in the world. So I definitely stand by that, but I'll just give an example. So in some of the older running handbooks I read, they were so hilarious and infuriating, where it'd be like, oh, you want to train for a marathon? Your wife better get in line because you're not going to be there at breakfast to whatever. But there are all of these. And I was like, I'm reading along and it's you've got to make a plan. You've got to have a good breakfast. I'm with it. And then there's a moment where I'm out of it. And I think that's what I'm talking about when I'm thinking about queer theory and the feminist perspective, is that I just want to read a book about running where some weird misogynist or heteronormative thing doesn't just stop me and then I'm tossed out of the book.
Yeah. When you say tossed out of the book, in those moments, do you snap the book shut and say, I'm done? Or in the past, had you kind of just been like, ugh, and then carried on, what did you do in the past? Obviously, you've tried to make this not that. And as you said, this is a book for everyone. I loved it. I read through it in a few days. It is short. It is small. I loved it. But what did you do in the past when you were reading those books?
It's also pink and its job is beach, as Tina will know, so you could take it.
Yes.
What I did in the past, I think, is just accept that that's how the world was and be like, oh, I don't know about that or something. But what I do now is I make marks all in the book and exclamation points. And if my partner is home, I run into the next room and I read it out loud. And do that sort of thing. But I'm a very active reader and I like a loud reader sometimes if somebody is near me. So,
that's okay. You're allowed to be. One other part of the book I want to finish up with here is you spend a good chunk of the book explaining in various chapters about your honestly quite horrific experience of getting run over by a car while running, which I had never heard of anyone having that happen to them, and hearing the kind of aftermath of what your body was and mind were dealing with was really quite jarring in some ways, that it really made me think, especially you described very much the way that I run, kind of like a very confident, I got this, I know cars, I know how fast this car's going, I know this, I know that. And I found it quite whoa, okay, Tina, this sounds like you in the way that Lindsey was running before this happened. So tell us, obviously I want people to read the book, but that was a defining moment in your running, not just for that day and the recovery from that, but still how it affects you today. So whatever you want to share of that part of your running journey.
Yeah, first of all, Tina, please cross at the light. Everyone listening, please cross at the light. Just give it a second of talking about slowing things down, because you don't think a car will hit you and run over your legs, but it might. Yeah, so that moment in the book is a defining moment of my running, but also of my life. So it was, I think, 11 years ago now. Car, I was running, and I don't know if I misjudged the light or if the car jumped the light, but a car hit me in the ribs, knocked me to the pavement in an extremely busy street in Brooklyn, the corner where Flushing and Bushwick cross for you New Yorkers. And yeah, and then it ran over my legs, and it was just such a strange experience that I still sort of can't believe that it happened, except that my friend Jane took photos of the tire marks on the back of my legs when I was at the hospital. So I know that it did. But it was this moment where I didn't feel any pain, but only an immense pressure. And I thought, did that just happen? Because it's hard to wrap your head around. But then, very quickly, the back tire came. And then I was like, oh, yeah, that's what happened. So, I mean, fast forward, like I was pretty banged up, but surprisingly okay. And I'm sure I have some lasting effects in scar tissue and stuff, but I was able to make a pretty good, I think, I don't know what a full recovery is, because also I have some, it changed my nervous system, let's just say. So now, like, I often have the sensation that I will be run over when I'm crossing the street. So, it changed me. I mean, in a good way, I'm much more careful than I used to be, but, it's hard to live with fear a little bit,
You're saying like you still kind of have almost like flashbacks of it as you're crossing a street, like the feeling of that happening.
Yes, like very often. And I will be really like irrational when people cross, when it's like, it's very clear, but I'm like, don't do that. I guess it's not irrational, because it's like, it is rational given my experience.
Yeah, of course.
But it maybe doesn't appear as such. But yeah, it was just a really terrifying experience, but also kind of fascinating. Like, I'm still really perplexed that I'm okay, and also that it didn't. The body is so amazing. Like, how can like a small SUV drive over me with 4 adults inside, and I don't feel any pain in the moment? I mean, later, yes, but in the moment, no. But it's a weird thing, I always say, and I think I write it in the book. It's a trauma story that I can tell at parties, which I think has been good for my healing around it, but is very different from most people's trauma stories. Yeah, and I think that writing about it, though, was very different, because I had gotten into a real routine of telling it as a story, and like with little props, like salt shakers, and then like going over my body as a spoon or something like this. And writing about it was really different, because I think there are some deeper feelings that were in there.
Yeah, I mean, you hear about that a lot. Like, I remember both Cara Goucher and Lauren Fleshman talking about that within parts of their life, of how it really was so traumatic in revisiting it and facing it in detail as they needed for the book. But also, a very healing experience, and coming out of it with, this not a superpower, but like those things can't touch me now because I've really processed them in depth rather than running away from them. Do you feel like that as well?
I don't feel that way. I don't think I fully exercised it. I think writing about my difficult college past did do something. I don't know. Maybe it's still working through, or I need to write it again, or I don't know.
Yeah. Well, it, as you said, it did some processing, it did some healing. So as we said earlier, that's maybe all it can be doing for now. Lindsey, is there anything else from the book that you want to share? Again, I'll put links in the show notes for people to go check it out, but anything else you want to share for our listeners today about it?
I would just like to share, like a lot of the handbooks, the older handbooks that I played on. This handbook also has some really nice drawings.
Yes, I meant to mention that. Yes.
Yeah. So my friend Hazel Meyer, who's an artist, agreed to do the drawings for the book, and I think it's worth it for the drawings alone. Although the sentences I like as well. But so I just want to give a shout out to Hazel Meyer for that. Thank you.
Yeah, they were really, I love checking them out. So yeah, there's these little drawings. There's probably like 15, 20 throughout the book. And just really well done. Very relatable to runners, things that we all recognize, things related to what you're talking about in the book, and just, very well done. So good shout out there. And I encourage people to check it out. Lindsey, thank you so much for joining me today. I loved our conversation. I loved your writing. Just so beautifully said. I think it sums up a lot that us runners never really get to express. So I appreciate you doing that. And thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much. And I can't wait to read your sustainable running book as well. I'm really excited about it. So this was a real pleasure.
The Running for Real podcast and everything we do here at Running for Real would not be possible if it wasn't for the Running for Real team. While I am the person who you hear from most often and maybe the face of the brand, the rest of our team are such critical pieces of what we do. And without them, I think I'd just be running around in circles with ideas. So I want to take a moment to thank our team. To Jeremy Nessel, who's been with me since the very beginning. Kat McKay, Sally Pontarelli, Kelsey Wang, Sandy Gutierrez, Louise Murphy, Andrew Basola, Alexandria Will, and Maria Vargas. Thank you to each and every one of you for all that you give to Running for Real and our community. I appreciate you, and I'm so thankful for having you as a part of the team. Oh, I really enjoyed that conversation. I really enjoyed that book. In case it wasn't clear, I encourage you to go get yourself a copy. Thank you so much for listening today. And thank you so much to our sponsors for today. You can get that $15 off by using code TINANEW at tracksmith.com /Tina. That will get you straight to support me. So to tracksmith.com /Tina. And also to 2 Before, if you use code TINA, you can get yourself 30% off. And if you have some goals this fall, definitely want to go check that out, 2before.com with the number 2 and use code TINA. And finally, please go pre-order yourself that copy of Becoming a Sustainable Runner. You may get it within the next few days. You are supporting Zoe and I. You heard me talking about it today, and I would really love to hear your thoughts once it comes out. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you next week.